Hello and welcome to another episode of the PAAPA podcast. Today we speak with Professor Kristopher Maday, Program Director for the University of Tennessee Health Science Center PA program. He has over 10 years of experience in trauma, critical care, and emergency and urgent care medicine, and currently practices at the Level 1 Elvis Presley Trauma Center in Memphis, Tennessee. He has won numerous institutional, regional, and national awards for PA education, and he is a podcasting extraordinaire contributing on 3 podcasts for medical education. Chris, we really appreciate the time and the opportunity to learn about the University of Tennessee Health Science Center PA program. But also, I think Steph and I are excited to talk to a kindred spirit since you've been doing podcasts long before we did. And now you're working on your 3rd podcast, I believe?
Hey, it's a 3rd or 4th. I lost count, to be honest.
That's awesome. We'll ask about that in a bit, but let's start with our usual first question, which is tell us about your path to becoming a PA.
Yeah, absolutely. So I attended the University of Alabama at Birmingham PA program, which at the time was a surgical PA program, one of 2 in the country back in 2005. And it was actually part of the first master's classes there. So we had a bunch of misfits, basically, because we interviewed in 2004. They told us that they were applying for the master's program, but they weren't 100% sure if they were going to have it by the time that we started. So we had to accept our position there, and it was either going to be possibly get a bachelor's or possibly get a master's. So we had a nice little group just because we all wanted to do something in the surgical realm. We all obviously took risks going to a program that we weren't really sure we were going to have a master's program. But it was a really nice, tight-knit program. I think there were 28 of us at the time, and we all just really bonded. And I think that's a common theme with a lot of programs is you finally get in with a bunch of people that you want to talk about medicine with. You might have been the only person in your friend group from home who knew anything about medicine, and so you got a chance to really bond. And we all still talk to this day, and it was just a really great experience for me. I think most people have a good experience going through PA school, but it's a tough endeavor, and I really enjoyed it. And so what got me into it was, weekend warrior athlete type person in college. I did some weightlifting, powerlifting, strongman competitions, do Scottish game competitions now into my 40s. And so I various orthopedic injuries, wrists and shoulders and whatnot. And so we always joked around that we had a family orthopedist because my sister was a Division I gymnast, and my mom played volleyball, and my dad played golf. And so we were constantly going to this guy for various aches and pains. And so I was getting my wrist scoped for a various ligamentous injury in my wrist. And he was asking me, I think I was a freshman or sophomore in college. And he said, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I think I want to do physical therapy or something with athletes and whatnot. And he said, well, hold on one second. Let me introduce you to somebody. And he brought his PA in. And he said, I just want you to talk to Jack for a little while and see what your thoughts are. So I explained to him what my passions were, what I enjoyed doing. And he said, this may be something that you want to think about. So he let me shadow him a few times. I got to go into the operating room, which kind of hooked me into the whole surgical aspect of things. And it was pretty much from that moment that I knew that this was what I wanted to do. Medical school never really crossed my mind, mainly just because, to be honest, I really didn't think I had the chops for it. I was never really the smartest kid in high school. I got good grades in undergrad, but everybody that I knew that was going to medical school were top of their class, super motivated, knew that this was what they wanted to do from the moment that they could walk. And that just wasn't me. And so I thought that this was a really good profession for me to get into because it allowed me to segue from my kinesiology major exercise science background. And at the time I thought I wanted to go into orthopedics, obviously. And it just seemed like it was a great segue, especially having an opportunity to talk to somebody who was in the profession and really sold me on it. And so that's what started moving me in the direction of getting my prerequisites in undergrad. That also allowed me that particular orthopedist had contacts at Georgetown University Hospital. So he contacted that department, got me a job as an orthopedic technician after college to get my hours, and just really pushed me in that direction. And so that was my journey from probably about early 2000s until 2007 when I graduated.
Before we jump into your clinical career, I want to circle back to something that you said that perks my ears up a little bit because I think it's something that we hear a lot, and I think it's a common misperception. You said that you really didn't think about going to medical school because you didn't have the chops for it. And I think maybe there might have been a day when perhaps the academic preparation of students going into PA school wasn't comparable to that of those going into medical school. But I think that day was long, long ago. And it certainly is not true today. As a fellow educator, I wonder if you would just comment a little bit on that concept, and particularly for pre-PA listeners who may be thinking about their path, or maybe thinking about medical school, or maybe thinking about PA because they can't go to medical school. What if you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly that was just my individual perception, was that you had to be top of the game to go to medical school, and that was who they were accepting. And I'm not that, so let me settle on the PA route. What I found out was not only was PA school exceedingly rigorous, but as I have made my way through education and certainly taking classes with some of the medical students at UAB, you find out that the requirements to get into PA school are often higher than what they are in medical school. It's certainly how it is here at UT. The prerequisites are much more stringent. The acceptance rate is much lower in terms of the number of applicants to number of spots. And so I think that's part of the perception shift that we're trying to make just nationally as a profession, is just saying, listen, this isn't a step back. This isn't a backup position of somebody who wants to get into medicine. This is something that you've really got to work at. And now as a program director and talking with students, we're getting ready to go through our application cycle. We have students who could get into medical school right now if they wanted to, and they're choosing to go into the PA world because they have done their research. They realize it's a much better fit. And so I 100% agree with you. I think that back 20 years ago, it was very much, maybe I can get into medical school, maybe I can, so let me settle on this. And right now, it's very much, no, everybody that's getting into medicine right now can do whatever they want to do. This is just a good fit for them. And doing the research and really finding out if this is a profession that fits your personality is really what is paramount in fitting into a good program.
Chris, I wonder if you could expand upon this from your perspective. You talked about, which is things that we've all seen in our programs. We have students who are coming to us that have just as strong of an application as they would if they went to a medical school. Many times they've taken the MCAT and they've done quite well. But as you said, they've really looked at both professions and they've said, this is for me. Is there a generational component to that around concepts of the length of time that it takes to commit to a career in medicine versus the time it takes to get into the PA profession? Is it about hitting your profession more quickly? Is it about they don't really care about the extra money? What do you think are really driving these things?
I think some of it has to do with the undergrad advisors. And I think that they're becoming much more aware of the PA profession. And I think back when I was an undergrad, if you went in and you talked to an advisor and you said, yeah, interesting in medicine, it was either medical school or nursing. Those were your two options. And I think now they're much more cognizant of the PA profession, of just saying, what do you want to get out of medicine? I know we've got a really good relationship with a couple pre-health advisors at University of Memphis, which is local to us, as well as the Knoxville. And that's what they ask us, is they say that when they sit down, they say, what do you want to get out of medicine? And I think that's a great question to ask somebody who wants to get into taking care of human beings, is what do you want to get out of it? Are you in it just to take care of people? Do you enjoy interactions? Do you enjoy fixing things? There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do medicine, and whatever way that fits for you is what is going to drive you through school, through those hard days of anatomy lab, through pharmacology, clinical rotations, and then as into the profession. So I think a lot of it is the generational, so to speak. I think the younger generation that's coming in is just much more, at least I feel this way, much more cognizant of what they want out of life than I was when I was in my early 20s. And so they have a direction of what they want to do, and they're much more focal about asking those really good questions in interviews about what can you do for me, as opposed to how can I fit into this program. And I'd like to think that some of that just has to do with their preparation at the undergrad level, and especially with our reputation as a profession being in the top 1, 2 nationally every single year. I think you've got to know about us to be able to really counsel these students coming in.
So you graduated from UAB, and tell us a little bit about your clinical career.
So I was a lucky one. We had a partnership with the Department of Surgery and Critical Care at UAB. During my clinical year, they actually came in and said, we want to hire as many PAs as we can to help staff our trauma burn ICU and our trauma department. And so if you want to do clinical rotations with us, we'll hire you on the spot afterwards. So there were about 6 of us that did that rotation track, and they hired 4 of us right out of school. So I was lucky that I had a signed contract rotation 5 in clinical year, which was great. And got hired, started there. Of course, it was hit the ground running. It was a teaching hospital. It was residents. The attendings were really great in wanting to integrate us into that particular health model. At the time, we had Q3 rotating residents of 3rd year, 2nd year, and then an anesthesia resident. And they wanted some continuity of care, so they had the PAs staffing during the day to just make sure that the patients were being taken care of at the level that they wanted. That also helped me because, 1, I had done my rotations there, but 2, it also helped with the education piece because they got us into the resident education days, the lectures. We got to learn. So it wasn't just a job, it was job and training, which I really enjoyed. And that really got my love for education because I got to see how good educators taught at the bedside, how they trained, how they prepared. And I did that for about 3 years. And then my mentor at UAB came and said, hey, I want you to give some lectures in the program if you're interested. And then if you really like it, we're going to have an opening for a faculty line if you want to come join. And so gave a couple lectures on some various topics and was hired there almost 3 years to the day of graduating as a entry-level assistant faculty. And so the rest after that is just kind of history in terms of the progression from there. But I've also done, obviously, as an educator, you do your part-time PRN work. And so I segued that into some emergency medicine. I was nationally board certified in medical nutrition at one point. So I ran the TPN service at UAB. Right now, I'm actually working for the Regional 1 Trauma Center here in Memphis as one of their APPs in their trauma unit that just rotates through the ICUs and the floor and whatnot. So I always had my mitts in critical care and emergency medicine because that suits my brain. I'm very much a jack of all trades, master of none. I like to be able to do a whole bunch of different things. Grew up on the show ER, so I just love that sort of mentality. And I don't take anything against primary care. It's not my thing. And so that's what I've been doing.
Chris, I think I don't want to skip over this point. Your TPN work. I think back to when I was training to be a PA, I had a surgeon that also had a nutrition background, and he worked with the VA on nutrition policies. He used to say the RDA, the recommended daily allowances that are put out by the national organizations, were the bare minimum to stay alive. And so I think, I don't know any other PAs who have really taken an interest in doing TPN work. I did internal medicine for a while, and it's quite challenging. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a meathead, been lifting pretty much all my life. So my day pretty much revolves around macros. And so when I was in clinical practice, especially in the ICU, we would do our weekly nutrition labs to see where their nitrogen balance is, and got into the tube feeds and are they getting enough volume? Are they getting enough calories, getting enough protein? Doing all the calculators. There's a host of different energy calculators out there based off of injury patterns and whatnot. And so I just developed an Excel spreadsheet, which may be the segue into me being a program director, is really starting out in those Excel spreadsheets of making these nutrition calculators. So I started doing that on the unit, started being the nutrition guy, and then found out that through the name escapes me right now, but it's a national nutrition certification company. They allowed PAs to be able to be certified in that. So I said, hey, let me go ahead and do that and collect some credentials. And so studied for that, passed it, got my board certification. And so when I made my jump to academics, the Department of Nutrition is part of the department that the program was in. And so they said, hey, we're looking for a provider who likes doing this stuff. And I said, perfect, sign me up. So every time they would order TPN, we would get the consult. I'd come in, I'd do all the calculated, figure out what their calorie needs are, their protein needs are, their fat needs, doing the electrolytes. If you enjoy that kind of stuff, it's actually quite fun because there is a lot of math and a lot of critical thinking involved, but you can mess some stuff up pretty quickly too. It's not for the light of heart.
So we really want to highlight the University of Tennessee and hear a little bit more about your program. So why don't you just give us a little bit of a snapshot of your program and what makes it maybe stand apart from other programs and what you're looking for in students?
Perfect. So our program started in 2014. I joined in January of 2017 to be program director here. And at the time when I started, it was the only state-funded public PA institution in Tennessee. Right now, it's the second. We have another one that started in Middle Tennessee. But it is the state flagship medical training program. The College of Medicine is here. It's across all 4 campuses. But Tennessee is weird in that it's thin and long. And so we're in the southwest corner in Memphis. But then as you go eastward, you get to Nashville and then Chattanooga and then Knoxville. So we have campuses in each one of those 4 major regions. And all of the medical students that train in Tennessee under this umbrella can train at any one of those 4 institutions, and the PAs work in that. We have close partnerships with a couple of the big hospital systems in each one of those regions. And the main reason that brought me here was really our simulation center. We've got a state-of-the-art regional sim center. It's 45,000 square feet. It's 5 floors. It really is one of those centers that you walk into and you just open your eyes to, hey, this is what medical simulation is like. We've got procedural trainers, we've got surgery trainers, we've got VR trainers, we've got mannequins that can do a whole bunch of different medical stuff, and we can broadcast that into different rooms. We've actually got a whole floor pharmacy for our Department of Pharmacy. So we do a lot of IPE activity there. But that's kind of the big thing for our campus here, is just being able to showcase that and showing the students what we can do with it. But one of the reasons that brought me here specifically was just smaller class size. It's 30 students. I came from a program that was getting up to 90 or so, and I just wanted to take a step back and really build a program from the ground up. And we're in the College of Medicine, so all of our students rotate with medical students across the state. They can do rotations in all 4 regions. It's an interesting way to be able to train our, at least what I think, our students, because we do our didactics in one region and then they can scatter across the state to see if they want to practice in Chattanooga or in Knoxville or in Nashville. I think that's one of the big draws for our program.
I share the experience of having the privilege of being able to just basically start a program from the ground up. And while that's a daunting, slightly terrifying task, it's also, as I mentioned, it's a privilege, and it is a unique opportunity for an educator to really think broadly and deeply about what a training experience should look like and how we can really tailor an education program to today's learners. So when you were creating the curriculum there, you and the team were creating the curriculum there, what were some of the things that you thought about that maybe were different from other programs that you've been involved with or your own education? How did you think differently about education in creating a new program as compared to older traditional models?
Yeah, so I came from an older program. UAB was established, I think, in 1968 or 69. It was one of the first couple ones. And they had a set way of doing things. And it worked. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you don't fix what's not broken. But I wanted to come here and say, you know, what are some things that we want to really highlight and do differently? And one of the things for me was hands-on training. And so, again, I talked about our simulation center, our chip center. And so one of the things that we really wanted to focus on was revamping our procedural training. And so we do a year-long procedural course where we go through and do all of the different procedures that PAs can do at the bedside. Luckily, we have the center to be able to do that for the procedures. But I do really feel like taking some of that training and being able to put it into the students' hands to say, hey, here are some things that you can do, as opposed to just sitting in a classroom and going through scenarios and doing case-based studies, which are great, is putting them in a simulated room with a mannequin that can do different dysrhythmias or can code, and we can see their CPR and put them into those training centers. So we really wanted to have more of an experiential type component. And so the challenge with us is, we're a 2-year program, so we're really condensed. And so we had to really think, how can we combine these things together to give them that experience, but still give them the basic knowledge that they need from the classroom. And so we do a lot of that TBL that morphs then into a simulation, or a TBL that then morphs into a procedural trainer. And so we do a lot of that combined teaching and combined instruction, which I think hits from a bunch of different angles. You get the verbal and the visual learners in the classroom, and then you get the kinesthetic learners of putting it into practice. And so I think being able to hit it from a couple different angles really benefits the students in grasping what they're going to be doing when they get out in the clinical year.
So, Chris, if I'm an applicant that's taking a look at your program, what are the typical things that you like to make sure they know about how to become a strong applicant?
So for our program specifically, we tell them that we are a 2-year program. And so there's not a lot of 2-year programs out there. And we feel like we do a pretty good job of educating students when they get here, but you've got to be able to hit the ground running. And so when we really sit down and talk with students and we're looking at their CASP application, we're looking at what was their academic load like. I know that there's a lot of advisors out there that say, hey, here are the prerequisites for your program that you want to apply to. So take each one of these prerequisites, one a semester, so that you're not getting overloaded, so that you can get good grades on it, so that you can show them that you got A's. But then all of a sudden they come to our program and they're jumping into these really rigorous academic load that maybe they're not ready for. And so when we talk to them, we just say, listen, you've really got to show us that you're able to jump into this program and really, really get your feet set early. So what we're looking at is we're looking at what's your credit hour load look like? What kind of things were you doing during your academic terms? Were you working? Were you doing other volunteering opportunities? Were you just taking the bare minimum 12 credit hours, or were you taking 18, 19, really trying to set yourself apart? And so we're looking outside of just the GPAs and the performance to really, what were you doing and how were you functioning while you were doing that? Because unfortunately, we just don't have the time in our program to stumble. If you stumble here, it's really hard to get picked back up again just because of how fast-paced this program is. So that's really what we're looking for, is a student who knows what they're doing and is ready to jump into the fold and take on that challenge.
I think that rigor is definitely something that catches most students, even though they hear about it and they think they're prepared for it. The rigor is something that catches many students by surprise. And I think the quicker they can get up to speed and figure out how to manage the volume. It's more of a volume issue than it is an intelligence issue, is what I find. So switching gears just a little bit, we do have something else in common, that you have also been involved with creating podcasts. You have a couple of well-known podcasts, the Airwaves and Educators podcast that you created with our friends Adrian Banning and Janelle Bludorn, and the Pain podcast. So tell us about your passion for podcasting and what that has looked like in your career.
So it all really started, I was commuting back and forth to a community ER that was in Alabama, that was about an hour away. And just at the time said, I need to be doing something more on these drives. Like the drive home, always after every shift, I usually drive in silence or just try to reflect and contemplate on the shift and just get myself back into a headspace. But a lot of times I was just listening to music and just driving. I said, there's just too much wasted space. And I try to be as efficient as possible in all aspects of my life. And so I just started looking for medical education podcasts, and I found a couple that I really enjoyed, learned a lot of stuff. It was a great medium for me to be able to digest those things. And I said, you know what, this might be something I want to try to get into. So I started planning. It took me about a year from the moment that I said I was going to do it until I finally got it in, because I wanted to get the brand. I wanted to get taglines and intros and really just set it all up, and said, if I'm doing this for my own education, I'm sure there's some people out there, both PAs that are looking to recertify and students, that would enjoy having some free education. So my Pain podcast was my endeavor into just board preparation. And so I just started preparing stuff. It was good for me because I got to stay up on top of things. It was good for my students that I was actively teaching because I could point them in that direction. And then that sort of segued into me meeting Adrian and Janelle and Sean Lynch, and it got into that whole social media aspect of networking. And we said, we all like this. This is all fun. So let's just do something together. So we put together the Airwaves and Educators podcast for us to get a chance to talk both together as well as interview folks who are PA educators or medical educators to just talk about what life is like. So there wasn't anything at the time that we put that together for educators. And so it was a medium that really was untapped. And the main reason why I wanted to get into it is I'd like non-traditional metrics and non-traditional scholarship type stuff. I think publications are great. I think doing research is fantastic, but I think that there's a lot of us in PA education, or at least the ones that I have come into contact with and had experience with, we just like teaching. We just want to be in the classroom. We just want to do the things that help us help these other students. And so if we can do some podcasts or do some projects like this where we're getting the word out about the profession. We're talking about how do you become a PA. You're bringing education into that sphere. Then why shouldn't that count towards your promotion metrics? And I've been working with our promotion and tenure committee here at UT to include things like blogs and podcasts and things that historically have not really been used for traditional promotion and tenure metrics. And so the more I think we can get things out like this from established educators like yourselves, I think it lends more weight than to other people coming behind to say, hey, this might be something that I want to try to do. And at least I'm starting to see that from various medical programs across the country that are putting together these educational type things. And it's also great for the students to be able to hear us too. Like I've had several students that applied to programs over the years that said I was introduced because I heard you on the podcast. And then every now and then I would just throw them an Easter egg and I would put out like a 10-second podcast that said, hey, if you're interviewing at my program and you're listening to this, just stop by my office and yell butterscotch. And so I'll have some people that'll just walk in and do that. And it just lets you know that you've got another avenue to be able to interact with people. And I think that anytime you can do that is money and time well spent.
Yeah, I think your conversation around promotion and tenure is spot on. And this to me is really akin to qualitative research. You're storytelling. You're just doing it in a different format. So I'm glad to hear that you're getting some progress with your institution as we are at University of Arizona. I think it's just reflective of the current state of the diversity of scholarship.
Right. It's coming. There's a lot of good institutions, some big ones too. I think Mayo started it. They've got some metrics that are out there. And I think once you start seeing some of those big institutions recognizing it, it's hard then to make the argument that you're not. So I think the more that you could add legitimacy to it, I think is really going to help those coming behind. And when you look at what scholarship is supposed to be, it's supposed to be readily accessible, it's supposed to be easily found, and it's supposed to be able to be viewed from several different angles. It needs to be peer reviewed. And I always make the argument that social media and podcasting is ultimate peer review because anybody can write a review. And so if you're good, if you're bad, somebody's going to tell you about it, as opposed to the 3 people that your paper might get sent to that holds that in the weight of their hand. Whereas now I can go into Libsyn and I can print out my entire download metrics and you can see where in the world they've been downloaded, the number of metrics, what the reach is. And that's hard to do with some of the papers that you might have written in journals. Maybe they've got an impact factor. Maybe it's you've gotten some citations from it, but I think it's a little bit more powerful in how those metrics can be used. And I think the more people use them and the more that we can see them is really going to pave the way for future educators to find their niche to be able to do things like this.
Yeah, I hope that's really true. I hope we see that evolution of the way universities think about scholarship in the future. Chris, we like to end every podcast by giving everyone an opportunity to give their parting shots. So if you have any additional thoughts or if there was something that we didn't cover that you wanted to address, please let us know what you're thinking and maybe some final advice for pre-PA students that might be considering PA school.
Yeah, first, I just want to thank you guys for having me on. I think this has been a great honor, lifetime listener, first-time caller. It's nice to be able to get on and, like Kevin said at the beginning, just talking with people that really enjoy doing things like this. It's really fun to be able to just get on and talk about passions that I think are meant to improve the profession as a whole. And so being able to not only highlight different individuals and different programs, but also, like you said, reaching out to the pre-PAs that are out there to say, hey, what kind of program should we be looking at? And so I think that as evidenced by this conversation, I think if you're looking at programs, really see what your program is doing. Search the faculty, see what kind of things that they're into, see what kind of projects they're into. Does that mesh with your personality as a student? Because again, you're going to be there, pre-PA student, for 2 to 3 years. And so you really want to be able to know that you can go into their office and sit down and have a conversation. I've got a jar of candy on my desk that I've got to replenish about every 2 to 3 weeks because they'll just come in and sit down. And that's the part that I love about it, is that contact, is outside of the classroom, just getting to know them. And I tell them, listen, just come on up, have a seat, grab a piece of chocolate, sit on the couch. Let's just talk about life. And I think that's how I met my mentor when I was in school, and she was instrumental in me getting to where I am today. I really would hope that at some point I'll have some students that'll think back and say, hey, this was really paramount in my journey to becoming a PA, and I'm glad I chose this program because of that. And the only way that you really know that is by doing your research. It's great if you got a couple programs in your backyard. Obviously, don't go across the country if you don't have to. Cost of attendance in higher education is ridiculous coming from a person in higher education. But you also want to be in a good fit because PA school's hard and you don't want it to be any harder than it needs to be. And so if you've got a really supportive faculty and you've really done your research to find people that you're going to really meld with, it's going to make your life so much easier, and they're going to support you through this process and hopefully have a mentor for life. And so that's my biggest piece of advice to pre-PA students is a lot of these programs are all the same. We teach all the same stuff, but really what it comes down to is the faculty. The faculty are what really drive the heart of the program. And you can go to a program that the faculty just you don't jive with, and that's fine. That happens. But it's also going to make things a little bit more harder than they need to be. So do your research and go on these interviews and ask those tough questions. That's what we like. We want a student to really, I tell them, put the Spurs to me. Ask me the tough questions that you want to know about, because this is as much as me looking at you as you looking at us. And so do your research, find out who's there, and ask the tough questions, I think are the big pieces of advice I can give to pre-PAs.
Chris, that's great advice. And I think Steph and I are going to be putting together a How to Choose a PA Program episode. It's one of our last 10 before we wrap things up. And I think that's a great head start to that. What a great transition for us. Plus, I love the fact that you're paying homage to your mentor and paying it forward with that mentality and culture of mentorship. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today, and we wish you the best of luck in your role there.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate being on, and I love the podcast.
Thank you. We want to thank our guest, Professor Chris Maday, for his time and the information he provided about the University of Tennessee Health Science Center PA program. We also want to thank him for his work on the many podcasts that he's been producing that have helped our PA profession. Tune in next time as we speak with leaders of our profession, both nationally and worldwide.